Okay, says we're live. Okay, let's do this then. All right, hey guys, and thank you so much, Sunny and Lasha, for joining me on this second ever stream of the Product Angle Chats. Super grateful to have you here. I'm still learning how to stream and the bits and bobs that go with it. So if there are any issues, my apologies in advance. But super excited to have you guys on. Since there's three of us, it's not going to be a interview style chat. Let's just have a chat like we had when we met in New York City way back when. I think it was last year some point. So it's just that jump. Feel free to jump in.
At that time.
Say that again.
Yeah, we were recording at that time when we did meet for the first time.
I know.
That would have been great.
That was cool. But next time, I'm sure there'll be another time when we are allowed to go back out at some point.
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right. So start off with Sunny. Just want to get you guys to introduce yourselves, who you are, and what you do. So, Sunny, if you want to start off.
Yeah. So, hey guys, I'm Sunny. My tagline is like create content and code. Basically, like create content, being my podcast, I write articles. It's all on my website. Just different forms of content. And of course, I'm an engineer. So right now, I'm working at Nomad Health, and I also do a lot of side projects and startups on the side that I'm a part of. So Iron Mike being one of them. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. Yeah. And just some open source little side projects here and there. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool.
Sweet.
Lasha?
Yeah, sure. So, hey everyone, my name is Lasha. I am also a software engineer, currently working at Walmart e-commerce in the new product innovation division, which is a fancy way of saying like experimental projects and new things that are being rolled up for things like supporting coronavirus efforts and so forth. I have a background in traditional graphic design. That's actually what I went to school for. But over the last 10 to 15 years, there was a gradual transition into doing software engineering full time. And my current focus is trying to build as many passive income sources as possible and documenting my journey along the way. And it's been about a month since I started, and so far, so good. I'd love to talk more about that if we get the chance.
It's cool that we both work in like Corona-related industries right now.
Yeah,
like
it's wild.
And commerce, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Walmart started a massive hiring spree with like over 200,000 employees or something like that, which in itself is mind-boggling. But yeah,
Walmart's actually pretty well placed because you can just stop into a parking lot or something, have people bring out whatever you need, and just take it home right there and then, as opposed to having to wait for someone to come deliver it at your home. With delivery times right now, it's getting, I know Amazon Prime, at least in New York City, they used to deliver pretty quickly, but now the lead time has just increased. And at one point, I think it was 30 days before you can actually, have your Amazon Prime groceries delivered. Whereas Walmart, you can just drive into that big empty parking lot. Someone can bring it out to you, put it in the trunk of your car, and you're off again. So I think Walmart is very well placed with all that real estate they have to handle this.
100%. It's been kind of wild, especially seeing all the other teams and the stuff that they're working on, and how my team's efforts are playing into it all and integrating with everything. It's challenging, especially for a giant organization like that, but it seems to be helping so far. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Definitely. I mean, what's one thing that you would say about yourselves that you cannot Google?
Sunny, you want to take that one first?
Yeah. So I think I have to think about all of it. Lasha, you go.
Okay, cool. I think I'll probably say that outside of software engineering and design and development and stuff like that, I'm into like a lot of like physical non-digital things. Like I've always been into cars and like racing and just like repairs and modding vehicles and stuff. I drive like a small sports car, and like all of my friends also drive sports cars. And over the years, we've done like maybe a dozen or more like small to medium sized modification projects. And I kind of feel like in the ideal world, that would be my non-computer related thing that I would always be doing, even though cars and automobiles these days are all computerized and all that. But yeah, that's something you probably can't find about me online.
Nice. Love that.
Yeah, actually, that sparks mine as well. So actually, hobby related. I used to be into a lot of like trading card games, just even a couple of years ago. So like Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, stuff like that. And actually, there is one photo of on my Instagram of me just like in a large competition, and I think it's just like statewide or something like that, regional wide. And yeah, and just you can see me playing, and it was fun because it was building your own deck of cards, kind of combining. It's almost like building a project in that sense.
Yeah.
But I like how I just flexed a lot of my creative muscles in that hobby.
Nice.
Fun fact,
Yeah.
speaking of flexing muscles, I used to compete in amateur professional arm wrestling.
Wow. Interesting. That's why I love these questions, because what's something that you can't Google about somebody tends to draw out something really niche or something that no one knows about. I love those kinds of questions.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Cool.
You should put that on your Twitter bio from now on.
And I think there's the strength emoji
Exactly,
that'll cover exactly that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice. Cool.
What's a favorite tool that you guys use, in work or at home? What's a tool that you cannot live without that you love?
I use Slack just about day to day, but I feel like it's a pretty easy one.
Yeah.
And I also kind of use Trello. So when you're working in big projects, Jira is pretty popular.
Yeah.
I actually tend to use Trello, and also actually even better than that, there's an app that I found recently. It's called Priorities. I think it's on iOS as well, but I know it's on Android.
Okay.
And basically, it's like a little to-do style app. I don't know if I have anything secret in there, but the way it works in terms of like productivity is you figure out 3 things that you want to get done in the day. So you plan it out in the start of the day, and it actually will ask you every time. So it's not like a regular to-do list where you just forget about it.
Yeah.
So it'll ask you every time, and then you just mark things off. And then the next day, it'll ask you like what you did complete, and then it'll just kind of trickle over to the next day. So you keep planning it day by day until like 3 things. So it's priorities. So really liking it so far.
Yeah.
Pretty good idea.
Sweet. I love it. Yeah. I've also tried to use various apps that do something similar. But on that note, one thing that has kind of reemerged as pretty significant in my life from like a productivity and work perspective is just the idea of keeping lists and checklists in particular, not just like daily to-do lists, which have its own value, but the concept of checklists has been something that I've started to heavily incorporate into pretty much every aspect that I can think of, right? Like having a checklist that I work off of, first thing when I wake up in the morning, like an afternoon routine for my breaks or things that I want to do around the house, chores and so forth, and like down to like specific work techniques that I'm trying to incorporate. Like I'm doing like at least 3, 4, 5 pomodoros a day, both for like my full-time work related stuff, as well as the stuff that I have going on the side. So yeah, like checklists have kind of been pretty magical. And I'm just using the built-in notes app on my phone, and it has like a little bullet point feature, and I just like check those things on and off, add whatever I need to, remove whatever I don't need anymore, something that's deprioritized. So yeah, the power of checklists. I think there's even a book written on that called Checklist Manifesto. But yeah, it's a pretty big deal, I think, for me at least.
Different contexts. That's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
By the way, we have Kyle watching. He just sent a message on YouTube saying hello. So hey, Kyle, how are you?
Hey, Kyle. Good stuff.
Try to open the if you want to look.
Yeah, I think you may even be able to look on the StreamYard page, because I can get that. I think there's a tab that says comments.
Live comments. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
so you'll be able to. You don't have to switch.
Yeah, good stuff.
So let's talk about some of your personal projects. Now, Sunny, I know you have Iron Mike, and Lasha, you have some courses and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about your personal projects, getting that idea, building it, iterations, getting feedback, because I think, getting feedback from users or getting that, talking to people and getting out there, I think is very important. And sometimes, I'm guilty of it as well, where 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock at night, I might have this amazing idea. And it's so easy to just get on your computer and start doing things, as opposed to getting out there and talking to other people. So as you're talking about your own personal projects, I'd love to hear about your approach to getting out there and talking to people and balancing it with that, let's build something.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about Iron Mike. It's an idea that came to be around like early summer of 2018. We launched in August, and Kyle is on the stream right now. He also helped us build it, Leon as well. So the idea came about because it was just a pain point of mine for my own podcast. I wanted to have a website for it for a while, but I'm like a little bit lazy with building a website, keeping it maintained, even though that is what I do as my career. But yeah, that's something I just wanted as little friction as possible, as little effort, and just producing the episodes. I want to go from recording over to a published episode and not have a lot of steps in between. So the website part of that, I wanted just that to be automated, and that's what Iron Mike is. You can search for your podcast on there, and it automatically generates your website, and then it also keeps it up to date. So if a new episode I release, it just shows up on the site. So I think that's pretty interesting, because in terms of talking to people, it's mostly like talking to myself. I was the audience, I was the user for my own product.
That's usually the best way.
Yeah, I agree. So it's still something that I use today. Iron Mike is not really something that it's mostly like in maintenance status right now. So I'm not really adding features, but that's also to the importance of releasing, because Iron Mike is out. I can provide that still as a service. We get some users here and there from time to time. And there's also a lot of lessons that I learned as well for Iron Mike.
Yeah. Do you see yourself taking that project somewhere farther down the line, or you're just not sure about what?
No, for sure. We had a really weird product market fit. Weren't able to clarify what the idea was to people. So we all think the idea is still really good, but we're kind of in that Silicon Valley area, or from the show, or it's oh, we have this amazing idea, but no one gets the idea. So it's really mostly on the marketing and communication side, rather than figuring out a different product to build. So I think that we need to kind of reverse what we've done. We started on the website side. A lot of people are they don't know why they need a website. They don't know what benefits they get, what SEO is, all that stuff. So I think we need to just simplify that down, that communication stuff. We did that a little bit, but we definitely do more. And also something we found out is that people just want everything in one service. So there's a lot of podcast hosts out there. They may or may not provide a website along with it. We just started on the website end. So I think actually we should reverse that and kind of do what everyone else are doing, and then take what we learned from the website building part and making that part really good. So I think a future product would be just full website, full podcast hosting, or even just taking that website generator out of Iron Mike, rebuilding it as a little app that people can use, so it can just be really simple to the point of what the service does.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see where that goes, because also over the last couple of years, like podcasting products have kind of exploded a little bit. Um, and like the first thing that comes to my mind is Transistor FM
Yeah.
from Justin Jackson. Um, and it seems like there's some overlap in the mission and the problem that's being solved, and kind of differentiating yourself and what you have to offer is going to be a pretty interesting challenge, I think. I mean, the market is large enough for there to be plenty of players, and I in particular like your product and what you were able to build in a pretty short amount of time with very limited resources. And yeah, I'm excited for you. That's awesome, man.
Thanks. Yeah, I think like one of our benefit is that we're not tied to any host. So you can use Anchor, you can use Transistor. I love Transistor and what Justin's doing. But yeah, and also in regards to the quickness of how long it took to build, took about 3 months. And one thing that I would say to that is that is actually, I think, a very long time to get an initial product out. And I ended up burning out because I was working almost like every day to get that initial MVP out. What I would do if I was to redo it, or just the next project that I work on, is to just reduce the scope, or we can just launch something in a month or less. And if possible, maybe just not code at all. There's a lot of no code tools, or just prove out the concept and just like get like user groups or something together. Maybe some like fake mock-ups or something, see if people sign up, and get that going in like mere days or weeks.
Definitely. And your entire team is here. I believe Kyle's on the stream. We have Leon on the stream. So your entire Iron Mike team is here. And hey, Kevin, thank you for joining as well.
That's awesome. Welcome, everyone.
Yes. So I want to just talk a little bit about burnout, because burnout is real. And when I worked in an office, you would go in at 9, you do what you got to do, have your lunch break, and then you're done by 5 o'clock, and you're on your car or train or whatever, getting back home. Now, when you work remotely, and I've been working remotely, I think, for about 7+ years now, there is no, 9 o'clock start, 5 o'clock finish. Sometimes I'm answering calls, emails at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, especially if you have team members across the world where you may need to do a conference call at, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. So talk me through a little bit of the burnout. When do you start feeling it? What it is, and just talk me through that mentality of burnout and how you think we could, it's preventable.
Yeah, I think that burnout, it's very hard to figure out when it initially starts, because you normally find out by the end when you're already like fully burned out. I think when you're just planning, like same thing, like I said, with the amount of time it takes to release something, I'll just make sure like you release as often as possible. And then make sure that, in between those releases, you take the breaks that you need. Because I think it's really important to get that feedback from something. If you're working on something for really long periods of time with no feedback, not talking to anyone, you just suddenly, start to get really burned out. You start to like not work on anything at all. And you maybe even pivot to a whole different project idea. And that cycle just keeps continuing. You're just like got like 3 projects in progress and nothing released. So yeah, just like release something. It could even be content, like Lasha mentioned about documentation. Documenting your process, I think, is really important. So do that, release like a piece of content, maybe a feature, something out there. Then people will start talking about it. That gets you kind of more motivated along the way.
Yeah, the idea of a continuous feedback loop and how it kind of plays a role in your mental state and how you think about your project and how you just approach the entire thing. I think that has tremendous value. So that's a super good point.
Yeah, definitely. Learning, writing, creating, and releasing public is a whole different ballgame. I mean, up until 2018, I think I was relatively unknown online. I had a few social media handles, but I really didn't use it. So, writing more often online and sharing online and making internet friends, it's you get a lot more feedback, a lot more faster. And, also at the same time, doors open up and you get access to people that maybe you necessarily don't. So it's it's an experience, and I think burnout is real, and I'm still trying to figure out how to identify the the symptoms or the early stage things that you may need to be aware of, just so that you can change your strategy or what you do, how you do things, so you don't actually get overloaded into that burnout phase. So I'm still learning a lot more about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess on my end, as far as workload and just having so many things going on at the same time and dealing with burnout, over the past I guess 10 years or so that I've been working full time in like the startup world and like just the tech scene in general.
Yeah.
I've always had things happening on the side, right? And it would be a balance of taking on freelance projects and just consulting projects across tech and design in general, working with small marketing agencies or small startups, mom and pop shops and stuff like that. Sometimes for for free, like pro bono projects and stuff like that, just to help out the local community. And I would also take on teaching as well. So I've previously taught for a couple of years at a university where I graduated at, and then I continued teaching at like a more of a vocational school, where I would be doing web design and web development, WordPress, like responsive design and stuff like that. And all of that stuff was happening all at the same time, and just thinking that I was invincible and I would be able to continue this and keep it up, and like, wow, look how busy I am. I must be so great and important and all that. Like that kind of mentality of like thinking that you have to do so much and constantly overload yourself is one thing that I've learned that is like, it ends up being unhealthy. And can like physically burn you out. Like you might not emotionally feel it at first, but when you have that physical like fatigue at the end of the day, that's kind of a sign for me that something worse is probably going to happen mentally, and to start taking a step back and reevaluating how I think about something or how I feel about something. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, being self-aware is a skill in itself. And having that ability to realize, hey, something's not right, it's very useful to have.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, you guys are both engineers. I'm assuming you both used to go to an office and work from an office at one point in life. What are you seeing in terms of the shift now that you are work from home? How has that impacted your how you work and how you interact with your colleagues, other engineers, product managers? How has working from home impacted you guys?
So I think communication is actually a lot better when everyone is remote. But before I get into it, I think that like the work from home situation right now is not really ideal, because
Yes.
we can't go to a coffee shop, we can't go to like
Absolutely.
a co-working location, all those things that are nice about remote work, we don't have right now.
No.
But in terms of communication, I feel like it's better because, one, you don't have to deal with all of the conference meeting distances that we have. So, a group of people are in a conference room, and they're all in person. They're all, talking to each other. And then you have a few people that are calling in remotely. They're kind of the second-class citizens, the people that are calling in. And the people in person, they've got the body language going on. They're the ones that are able to go like back and forth really quick.
Yeah.
Once everyone is remote, once everyone has the the video screen, whoever wants to talk, they just talk. Everyone's on the same playing field. So I like the way that video conference calls go when everyone's remote. Besides that, I think that I also have had more conference calls in general, or just like short one-on-one meetings.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because that's not something that you always get when you're in the office. Sometimes awkward to like, tap someone on the shoulder when they got their headphones on, like, hey, can you look at this real quick with me? So I like just being able to be like, send a message or set up something on someone's calendar, and then just getting the work done, essentially. There's no awkward, office stuff that you typically have to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. I think on top of that, the one thing that I've really noticed to be really impactful is that people seem to be more selective with how they communicate now that we're completely remote, right? So instead of just having a conversation and figuring something out during the conversation, which tends to stretch out that meeting or conversation much longer, in my case, I would kind of take a little bit of time, think about it, plan out what I want to say, how I want to say it, what problems I want to address, and what action items I could possibly derive from it. And that usually ends up helping everyone that's involved, whether it's a one-on-one conversation or if it's a meeting with my whole group, where we need to figure out a strategy for implementing a feature, or we need to talk with product to figure out what the trajectory is for like the entire project that we're working on. So yeah, like being more reserved and selective is has been pretty beneficial. So yeah,
definitely, you're communicating with purpose. And I've always heard people say that it's safer to over communicate than not communicate. But I would say over communication creates noise. Noise creates confusion, and confusion creates misalignment. So I do think that it's important to communicate, but you have to communicate with purpose, because if you're sending out 3 emails a day on the same topic, at some point your team's going to be annoyed every time they see email from Pradeep. Guess what? They're not going to pay attention, right? So I do think that what you're doing is great, and I think more people should do that, because instead of just spitting out information in the world, communicate with purpose, which allows the person who's reading it to really grasp and understand it, as opposed to have to come back and say, hey, what did you mean here, or what's up? And so I think that's great, which really leads me on to the next question is, as you work with product managers, what's some of the tips that you could give to a product manager, how best to work with engineers? Because I found that engineers have a lot of information and a lot of experience that they can bring to the table. Now, there are engineers who just want to code, and that's fine. And there are engineers who want to have a seat at the table and maybe aren't getting that seat at the table, for whatever reason. But how can we improve that communication and collaboration between an engineer and a product manager?
So Kevin actually had a funny quote here in the chat. He said, "I survived a 1-hour meeting that could have been a 5-minute email."
Yes, Kevin. That's when you get pulled into the conference room, and one thing leads to another thing, and by the time an hour is gone, it's really next Friday is our launch date.
But yeah, like for PMs, I think kind of in relation to that, not have as many meetings, especially if they don't have a purpose. Just like keep it in an email, keep it like on the Jira ticket, keep it in Slack. Just have as much information as possible, just like document it and written down, because engineers really value their coding time. And I know when I have a day full of meetings, I feel unproductive, whereas for a PM, that might feel really productive. So it's two sides of the coin there. So yeah, definitely, I think over communicate, but like have it written down first, and then have a one-on-one or some sort of meeting only if you need to. And then for the engineers that do actually enjoy the interaction, like with the people, with product, or be part of that like ideation process, just like be open and ask for feedback from the engineers. I've been on teams where that's happened, and it's been really beneficial because we feel like we're like a part of the process. We're, once we get to the building out the feature, they actually care about our thought process, our feedback on whether something's like the right way to build something in terms of user experience, or just design, or just technically. So just having that feedback and being really open, I think really helps to engineers and to project managers.
Definitely.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so from my experience, I love the engineers who, if I have an idea and they can foresee some kind of issue down the road, if they can come and say, you know what, this is good, but as a result of doing this, have you considered this? And I may not have thought about it, but once you see it happen, you don't want it to be, oh, I've just spent 20 hours building this, but it has an unintended consequence because we didn't think about it, but the engineers did. They saw this. And the engineers that I love working with are the ones that can say, okay, this is great, but have you thought about this, this, and this? And it gets people thinking.
Yeah. And I also find in corporations, a problem that I felt with that is that sometimes engineers do have that feedback that you'd find really useful, but they're like, well, it's already done. Like we're already finished, the process and everything. It's all finalized. So no, just go ahead and code it. I really hated that. I love it when project managers or anyone on that team was like, yeah, this is great. We'll go back and, and circle back on this.
Yeah, the contrast between like the different types of organizations and how they approach product and engineering relationships, as well as all the other teams, like whether it's UX design, in our case, we have everything from business to logistics to deliveries and like customer service, and just being involved with all of them. I feel like in my case, there have been plenty of opportunities to take it for granted, right? Because there are teams where product and engineering have those ongoing conversations, and product wouldn't move forward or commit to something without the guidance and opinions shared from the engineering side. And you can't always get that, and it sucks when you can't, because then you're left with something that could have been better, that could have been different if you had the chance to give your say, right? And to go back to one point that was mentioned about documenting everything, like in Jira or Confluence or Google Docs or something like that, right?
Yeah.
One challenge that's been pretty consistent across a bunch of different companies that I've worked with is that documenting something and writing things down and keeping a record of it is very different from people being aware of the fact that this thing that was written and documented exists, right? So the surfacing of valuable information is a whole separate challenge in itself. And I don't know of a tool that has quite solved that problem perfectly, where if I'm an engineer with a team of 3-4 others, and I'm joining another project, right? So I was previously part of a company called Jet Black, which was a Walmart-funded startup that got absorbed into Walmart e-commerce at this point. So now we're called conversational commerce, where we're doing conversational e-commerce basically. And it has been a tremendous challenge joining this team, because we know that all the information we need exists somewhere. Just finding this information is one of the most difficult things, because you have to talk to so many people. Some individuals have like one piece of context, and other individuals have another piece of context. So you have to build this puzzle and create like one big idea or vision of what it is that you need to do, or how you need to move forward to be productive. So just wanted to talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, the answer is always just add another documentation tool to the stack. It'll solve all your problems.
Or just send a couple more emails.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, Kyle mentioned Notion. That's also something that we use at Nomad as well. It is a pretty good tool, but I think it's something that people have to agree, like, this is the source of truth for everything. Otherwise, if you have, like, maybe engineers will use Notion, some managers will use it, but then PMs will be like, no, we use Google Docs, Google Drive, Jira. So if they use a different tool, if everyone's not on the same page, kind of defeats the whole purpose. But since there is like no one solution for everything, I would just say just making sure at least to link everything back in one spot. So let's say if you don't use Notion or you don't use Jira, but you make like a Google Doc or a spreadsheet somewhere, just at least have a link to it in the ticket in Notion, so that I can at least like know, I'm aware of it, that it is there, like Lasha, like you said, and I can click to it and go find it.
Yeah, and one way that can be done, or the quality of that can be improved, is to incorporate something along the lines of the scout mentality, where you leave something better than it was before you got there. And if you come across a piece of documentation or some repo that links to some libraries or some other piece of documentation that's valuable to you, and you found out something that isn't already there, just like add to the README, add to the Confluence doc, update the Google doc. Think about how this thing that was useful to you just now can also apply to other people that can be coming in with the same context as you, or even less, or perhaps just a completely different context, and what kind of questions they might have in order for them to get their work done. So I guess there's like an element of empathy, right?
Yeah, there's people that are lazy or just love job security. So the lazy ones are like, oh, I know how to do this now, but they're too lazy to document it. Or they just love the job security and not telling anyone else about it.
That's rough. That's rough.
Yeah.
Leon says he uses a Trello board with templates or documentation all linked together. I've used Trello and I kind of get it, but I don't know. I've just never really gotten into it. I mean, it seems like everyone is using it to an extent, and there's a lot of fans around it. But I just haven't got around. I can't figure it out, if that makes sense.
I like it for the simplicity, but I don't know if it's possible to effectively use it just for agile. I don't know. I don't know if it's like a one tool that can just do everything.
Yeah. And Kevin says, what we used to do in my old job is really create our own detailed template of documentation, stating the key points of what we need to know regardless of position. Yeah, I get that. And I think that the more documentation we have, the easier it is for people to get lost. And I think documentation should be specific for a specific purpose. If someone wants to know the entire story, they can go here. But, especially if you're presenting to a manager, a leader, a C-level executive, they don't want to see all the nitty-gritty. They just want to see maybe 6 months of work in one slide deck. So I think going back to what we mentioned, Lasha, earlier, is communicating with purpose, letting people know what they, what's appropriate or what they need, but then giving them the ability to go back if they want more information, as opposed to overloading them with everything. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now,
and Kevin also mentioned in the chat just now that part of the problem is that people don't take the responsibility to update those documents. They're just like hands off, like, nope, this is not my job kind of thing, which again goes back to the scout mentality of intentionally trying to leave something better than when you got there, right? Like having bias towards action and towards improvement, and adopting the mentality of trying to improve not just your world, but other people's world as well. Easier said than done. It's sometimes it takes a decade to change the mindset and philosophy of an organization, but something to keep in mind for sure.
Definitely. Now, Sunny, you had written an article for the Product Angle about working with engineering, and 3 of the things that you had put in that article was 1, avoid jargon, 2, ask questions, and 3, show empathy. So I guess, I'd love to hear from, your perspective, Sunny, when you were writing that article, what you meant and how you interpret these 3 points, and Lasha as well, from an engineering perspective, if you can tell us how you go about viewing these 3 bullet points.
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing that article, actually, because
thank you for writing it.
Communication between engineering and product is something that happens every day, but I feel like there's not a whole lot of content around it, which is why I think the product angle is a really awesome thing that you're doing.
Thank you.
So avoid jargon. So that's like when an engineer is talking to someone that's non-technical or not extremely technical. If you sound like an alien to them and you're trying to communicate a point across to them, they're not going to do what you want them to. So, communicating with intent, if you want them to add a new feature, or you're telling them about a bug or something that can be improved, or you're simply explaining how a feature works to someone that's a stakeholder to get them to buy into something. If you add a lot of jargon, they're just not going to understand what you're saying, and they're going to be like, well, he just told me, he threw a lot of information at me, I didn't understand it, so I'm not going to do anything about it. Jargon is good for talking with your own teammates that are speaking the same language. So engineer to engineer, use more jargon. It's effective language. But if you're talking to someone else, like outside of your team, use less jargon, enough just to show them that, like, okay, you know what you're talking about, but simplify it so that they can actually understand it. So that's the first part. Two, ask questions. That's kind of more of the like, don't be afraid if you're in a meeting or something to ask a question. Don't be afraid of others thinking that you're dumb to be asking that type of question. And I saw a saying recently where the person that asks the question, they're dumb for 5 minutes, but a person that does not ask a question at all, they're dumb forever because they don't get the answer. Right?
I mean, questions, I think, help. The way I look at questions, and I'm sorry to cut you off, is help drive conversation and thinking, because there's ways you can go get the answer yourself, but maybe, or you can tell people the answer, but by asking questions, you can help people think a certain way and start, coming to that conclusion maybe. So I think questions is important. There are no dumb questions per se, and I agree with what you said, but to me, I use it as a way to generate discussion and move the discussion a particular way.
For sure, yeah. It gets people to think about it, which is important. Yep. That's something I think everyone should do when they're in a meeting or something, because, ask the question that you might already know the answer to. You might get some extra information that you didn't know before, or you might be helping someone else that is either too afraid to ask the question, or maybe they didn't even know that they were missing information. So it just provides more context to everyone else. So just don't be afraid to ask questions. And this, I think, goes on both sides. PMs should always ask questions to engineers, and they should avoid jargon when answering that back. And then engineers should always ask questions on how a feature works, who's going to be using it in what way, stuff like that. And then empathy. This is just making sure that you know your audience and what problems they're dealing with personally day to day. So, an engineer is in the code, they're knees deep in it, and they want to, they're really close to the code. So they're not necessarily worried about, the launch of the major epic or the feature. And then, on the other side, the PM is only worried about the launch and how the end user will use it, the user experience, stuff like that. So yeah, just show empathy and make sure that when you're talking to them, you mention those points, being yeah, I know, day to day what you are, working on right now. And then the other side, they should also make sure that they understand where you're coming from. So just show a little empathy when you communicate with other teams.
Excellent. Sorry, Sonny. I was just playing around with the software. I didn't realize that I can put people's comments on the screen. I had no idea I could do this.
That's pretty sweet.
That is, I guess I should test it out more before going live. But I'm excited that I can do all this. All right, how do I get this? No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Sonny. Got a little excited there with the features here. Nice. Lasha, how can you, I guess, talk us through, the 3 bullet points and how you view these?
Yeah, sure. I think I'm pretty on par with exactly what Sonny has said. He hit the nail right on the head with each of these. And if I were to add just kind of some of my own touches to it, one thing that stood out to me was the questions portion and how much value can be packed behind a question, right? So if, for example, you and 1 or 2 other people in a meeting know some particular information, but there are some new individuals that are now part of the conversation, whether it's other engineers or product or design or UX or whatever it is, sometimes asking questions that you already know the answers to just sparks up the type of conversation that provides the context and information necessary to fill everybody else in to the level where they can then think more clearly and accurately, or rather precisely, about the thing that we are actually trying to do or the problem that we're trying to solve, right? So when we're, when you ask that question, it, like, knowing that it's going to be something that is actually going to result in helpful outcomes is something to be consider about, and that includes thinking about how you include or avoid jargon, and how you employ and deploy empathy in order to help everybody else around you. Because the idea here is that everybody wants to do the best job they possibly can. And when you play a small role in allowing not just yourself, but everybody else around you to feel better about something, or be more confident in how they approach a problem, or what questions they can ask on top of that, because you got the ball rolling, it really helps everyone. And that establishes a relationship between everyone. So yeah, I think asking these questions and being tactful with how we do that can be absolutely the most helpful thing. Like I have several memories of questions that were asked by other people, and I knew that they knew the answer to the question that they asked, but the conversation that sparked altogether was absolutely valuable, hands down, and everybody walked away from that meeting way better off. So it's not whether we ask questions, it's how we ask questions. So yeah,
for sure.
Agree with that, definitely, because when you ask those questions, you start realizing the people, the team members who start thinking a little bit differently, and you want to capture their, what their viewpoint is, well, because like you say, they may have figured something out that you may not thought about, or they're bringing value to whatever you're doing, and asking questions is just that driver to that conversation.
Exactly.
So let me ask you a question now. I'm going to ask it nicely, but the intent is nice, but you may not want to respond truthfully. It's a two-part question. Do product managers need to have technical skills? Is part one.
I think it can help. It's not a requirement, but that's I guess what I was getting at with the empathy part, because if you can kind of understand their world better, you can better communicate with them. But if you're a project manager or a product owner, I think it helps just for your own benefit, but it's not a requirement whatsoever. If you have a good engineering team, they're going to be able to communicate with you, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Over the years, I've worked with both technical and non-technical PMs, and what I've really concluded on is that it doesn't really matter as long as they know what they need to know, right? Like I can think of scenarios where I worked with somebody that's been in PM for over 10 years, and they haven't coded a single line of code ever, but they still knew how to ask the questions, what they needed to ask, like basically how to navigate the development world and software engineering and the architecture side of things without having that background. But also at the same time, if there's a PM that does have a technical background who has coded before, they might have additional context that'll allow them to, again, ask the right questions, right? And I think that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. Like, you don't have to have it, but it certainly doesn't make it worse. Like, it can only help, as Sunny said.
Yeah, you've kind of like answered my second question. Would you trust a product manager that isn't technical?
Yeah, cool. A good one anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. It depends, right? Like if the PM doesn't doesn't have the necessary context and information to be able to be effective, then it can harm everyone, right?
Yeah.
Right, like it can harm themselves as well as the engineers and everybody involved in the entire process. So it's in everyone's best interest to figure out what it is that they need to know to be effective and productive in their roles. So yeah,
Definitely. Thank you. And what's something that you know now that you wished you knew when you first started your careers as engineers?
Probably a lot of what we talked about already, which is just the importance of soft skills. When I started, I was like, I was going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. So I don't need those skills. I just need to be like really good at coding and like launch something. And that's all I need. Now I see it's good to understand the product side of it. So being able to communicate with people and actually know who you're building for, rather than how you're building something or what you're building. So just knowing the users, being able to like go out and just talk to people, communicate what your idea is, maybe even just influence. That's really what marketing is, just influencing people to use your product and like how it can benefit them. So if I knew that back then, I think I would have been a lot more successful in the side ventures that Kyle, Leon, and I have done.
That's amazing, and I didn't tell you to say that beforehand, right? Just I want to get you on record saying that I didn't tell you to say that beforehand, right? Because as part of the product angle, what I'm trying to do is work on sharing how to improve the soft skills, and the communication, the negotiation, the influencing, and I think that some people see it, but some people don't see it early on, and I think improving soft skills and working in cross-functional teams is really where I want to try and get more content and awareness around.
Yeah, and it really differentiates someone as an engineer if they have those soft skills. And I feel like it's already kind of part of that like level up track. So as a junior, as a mid-level engineer, it's not as important to have strong communication skills. But once you get to a senior or like staff or higher levels, that's especially when you're interviewing them, that's what you look for. So you see how they communicate their ideas. Can they do mentorship? Can they document well? Stuff like that. All of that's part of those soft skills.
Made my day. You made my day. You made my day there, Sonny. What about you, Lasha? What would you say to that question?
Yeah. I think in this case, or in quite a few cases, Sunny and I are more similar than different. But if I were to add a couple of notes, one thing that has been pretty beneficial for me is over years realizing that when I'm stuck on something, I don't have to keep fighting it until I figure it out for hours or days or weeks or whatever it is. There's somebody out there that has whatever information or piece of knowledge that will help you, right? So this can be as simple as asking for help or asking the right questions and just taking a step back and not feeling like it's wrong or like you're any lesser of an engineer or designer or UX person or product person by not asking questions, right? Like it really does come down to ego and not wanting to embarrass ourselves or be ashamed that we don't know a particular thing. Because there's still scenarios that I come across as an engineer where I ask questions and I'm like, yeah, I should probably know this, but I don't care that I don't know this. I'm just going to ask the question so I can just get it over with and let that be history so I can just get my job done. And yeah, just asking questions and not being afraid of asking for help and just move things along. So
definitely. Thank you. Now, since, we're all Zoom crazy to an extent, do you guys still have phone calls? Because, these 7 years that I've worked remotely in good times and bad times, video chatting has increased. But I find that sometimes a phone call just does the same, right? Don't get me wrong, there's a place for video calls to see the body language and expressions, and you can see that person. but I also feel phone calls in some situations do the trick as well. So I wanted to get your, thoughts on the having to see somebody in person, like a Zoom call, versus, just calling them up and having that chat while you walk down the street or, walk down somewhere.
Yeah, I feel like there's this Zoom fatigue that people are starting to experience. And that is when you're doing video calls, like there's the entire day.
Yeah.
You are fatigued just from having to be on camera. So kind of you're self-conscious. A lot of people would be looking at themselves and, looking back at them on their laptops. So they're self-conscious and making sure like, okay, I have to be presentable. Whereas just a phone call, you could be in your PJs, not anything, not showered or anything, and, you're good to go. So I think there's a good balance between the two. I definitely love, like at Nomad, we do mostly video calls, unless it's something really big with a lot of people, like a town hall. Not as important because it's just one person speaking to everyone else. But like for small teams, stand-up meetings or even one-on-ones, I do prefer video. Okay. Just because I do see their body language, like you said, Pradeep. And I just think it's still important just to have that person-to-person interaction. Whereas, now we can't actually go out and be in an office. So video calls, I think, are still super important.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I agree with that because especially on my end where I had an in-office job that was now made fully remote, keeping that sense of kind of place and being and kind of proximity with one another is definitely helped by the fact that we have video. But also at the same time, there are people who were always remote that we would always communicate with by voice anyway, whether their video would be on during meetings and stuff like that. That kind of matters less. But for folks that do come from an in-office experience, video certainly helps for sure. Definitely.
Now, as engineers, you probably get asked this question all the time, and we're gonna come up to the top of the hour, so we'll wrap it up pretty soon. But 2 more questions. First one: what tech stack should I learn? I'm sure you get that asked a gazillion times over and over again. What would you say to somebody who says, "What language should I learn? Where should I start?"
I have 0 opinions on this, obviously.
Okay.
No. So I'm definitely biased in terms of JavaScript, but I think I have some good reasons for it. And that's because you only need to learn one language to do a slew of different things. So you could build a full stack app just choosing JavaScript and whatever popular framework at the moment is. Right now it's React, probably something Express based on the back end. But yeah, you just learn one language. And then you can use that on the front end, on the back end. So you're building APIs, UIs, and databases can be like MongoDB can be JavaScript based. Just different things. Machine learning. There's so many things you can do. So if you want to like optimize your time, just learn JavaScript, and you're pretty good.
Fair enough.
Yeah. 100%. I think the fundamentals is exactly what anybody would need to start asking the questions of what they need to learn on top of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But I had a feeling that we were going to get asked this question, so I wore this shirt, and the stack that I believe people should learn is the Jam stack, which stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And it in my opinion, kind of takes a step back from the complexity of how we used to engineer and build websites. And we won't get into the details, but I think this is the way forward for anybody just getting into it. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and start incorporating it into a Jamstack project, which there's plenty of documentation available out there. So.
Nice. You've given me a minute clip of something I can try to cut out and put out there. So thank you guys for that.
Sweet.
Now, final question. I seriously appreciate your time, and this conversation has been amazing. What would you say to someone who's thinking of becoming an engineer or choosing their career path? What kind of advice or final things to think about would you tell them?
I would say do it. It's for two reasons. One, it's lucrative. So if you're trying to make money, everyone needs money to survive. Like, it pays pretty well right now. But the second thing is it's very creative industry too. Once you learn how to program, how to build applications, build products, you can really kind of do anything. So, in my case, I built a service that met or solved my pain point, and that's someone else can do that once they learn programming or how to build apps. So definitely do it, and you can have a lot of fun with it too.
Yeah, 100%. I think just making the decision to try it and dedicate enough amount of time to make an honest decision about whether that's something you want to continue doing or not is something that you have to do with anything, right? It's not specific with getting into engineering or whatever, but the creativity and the problem solving opportunities that are presented within engineering is literally limitless. And like there are still things that I come across after 15 years of doing web development and design and working with many different teams that I'm challenged every single day, and I appreciate that. So
yeah. Thank you guys, Sunny, Lasha. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot from you guys, and it's been an amazing chat. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to say before we say bye?
Follow me on Twitter, first and last name.
I'll put your thing up right now. Here we go. Follow Lasha on Twitter right there.
Woo.
And I got one for you too, Sunny, right there.
Sunny Singh on Twitter. Reach out.
Yep.
Nice.
Thank you, guys.
Cool.
All right,
Cheers.
thanks,
All right, take care. Bye.